Hello, this is Michael Strong with When School's Not Working, where we have the great pleasure of talking to educators, parents, and children who have gone through an alternative route to have a great education. And tonight we have the great honor of interviewing Olivia Barnes for our very last episode. I will let someone else introduce her, but first I'll just say I'm Michael Strong, founder of the Socratic Experience, where we help your child discover and develop his or her genius. Go, Kath.
Yes, hi, I'm Catherine Fraze. I'm the founder of Workspace Education and 100 Roads, and we are focused on creating infrastructure outside of the conventional school system for people who've opted out of the school system. And we're creating, right now, we're really heavily into creating virtual landscapes for education, which are quite unique and interesting. But now I'm going to pass you to Matt.
Thank you, Kath. I'm Matt Barnes, co-founder of the Education Game. Also, and the Education Game, we work with parents. We help parents grow young people like the woman that I'm going to introduce in a moment, young people who have a ton of agency, a sense of their own direction, purpose, and strength, but also autonomy. That means they have the freedom to make small errors or big errors, but they have the freedom to learn from them and to grow. I'm pleased to introduce my daughter, Exhibit 2 of 3, in terms of what I would hope every child and family could grow. Olivia Barnes, and she is a 17-year-old. I won't steal your thunder, Olivia. I'll just kind of tee it off, and then we can get into some of your journey. But Olivia is my middle daughter, well, my oldest daughter, my middle child, and she is doing her own learning path, and she's learning and making mistakes and learning from them and excelling. And again, I won't steal the thunder because she's writing a book, which is something that all 17-year-olds do, right? That's just right, isn't it, Michael? That's one of the things they do, right? Absolutely. So anyway, with that, I'll introduce Olivia Barnes. Hi, sweetie.
Hello. Thank you guys for having me.
Definitely.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Thanks for being here. So since you haven't watched, of course, Matt, I was shocked to hear that Olivia didn't watch every single episode of Matt Barnes.
You can't tell kids anything.
There you go. There you go. But a theme on this show, Olivia, has been, we think that the sort of self-directed learning that you've done is what everybody should do. And yet we realize there's a world out there that does not yet realize that. And so a question that always comes up for me, and I think for us, is presumably at some point you were part of the system. And I'd love to hear a little bit about when you were part of the system and what it has been like to leave the system. Give us a sense for what that journey was like.
Yeah, so I started out my freshman year of high school at a high-performing public high school in Houston. It was a visual and performing arts high school, and I loved it. It was amazing. Just the experience of being around so many creative youth was really, really impactful. And I learned a lot from that experience, but one thing I really didn't like, which was why I ended up leaving after my freshman year, was how rigid the structure was. So going into that high school, I had always been interested in visual arts, marine biology, swimming, and I was in the school for creative writing, but because we were spending around 3 hours a day writing in school and then extra homework outside of school along with all our academic classes, I didn't have any room to explore the other things that I was already curious about and I already had passions in. So that was a big deciding factor in what eventually led me to decide not to return for my sophomore year.
You dropped out?
Yes, I did. I did drop out of that high school. And it wasn't because grades were affecting me, because I was doing really well. It's just that I wasn't exploring the things that I thought that God had called me to do or that I was really interested in doing.
But I'm sure you had, but hold on, I'm sure you must have had some bad grades that were causing you to rethink. Maybe you couldn't handle that school. Maybe was that it?
I love how you're trying to get me to say this. No, I was a good student. I had
What does that
all
mean?
A's, all high A's.
Oh,
in the
you're a straight A
traditional
student.
sense.
You were a
Yeah,
straight A
so
student and
straight
you
A
dropped
student.
out.
And I dropped
I
out.
see.
Yes.
That's weird.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so then sophomore year, I learning from some friends who had done something similarly, I decided to try to see if I could self-design my learning experience, what I called my self-design school. So I took, since I was interested in marine biology, I decided to see if I could advance my knowledge of biology. And so I took some biology classes at the local university in Houston, University of St. Thomas, along with taking my history and English classes at a local private school, and then Spanish and math classes online and with a tutor. So that was a very interesting year just because I was spread out over a lot of different campuses and a lot of different platforms. But that was also really enjoyable. I had somewhat of a traditional high school experience going to that private school and taking some classes there. I had some of a college experience, a very traditional homeschool experience with the tutor, and then an online experience as well. So that was really enjoyable. But what I learned from that year was the importance of discipline, because that was somewhere where I really had to manage my schedule because all my classes were on different times and on different days. And so I had a lot more free time than I did at the public high school I went to freshman year, but I also needed a lot more discipline to manage that schedule. And so then halfway through the second semester of my sophomore year, COVID hit. And I finished the year, but then I decided that it would be interesting to see if I could try to self-direct my learning entirely. Aside from traditional, classes, like which I had been taking in my self-designed learning experience, see if I could really explore the things that I was passionate about outside of the classroom setting. So going into junior year, that is what I did. And I will tell you that it was extremely, extremely difficult, because one thing I did not learn in any of the schools that I went to was how to manage my time when I actually had no one telling me what to do, when I had no one looking over my shoulder saying, okay, these are the classes you need to take. In my self-design school, I had a lot more free time, but I still had, coursework that I had to turn in, tests, papers, things like that. When I was self-directing my learning, I had none of that. No one looking over my shoulder. It was all me trying to direct myself, which is very challenging. And I learned that it's, even if it's not a teacher telling me what to do, it's really helpful to have accountability, which my dad will tell you. It's helpful to have accountability in various forms. So I started out trying to research sea turtles at a sea turtle restoration and rehabilitation in South Padre Island, which is south of Houston in Texas, and learning about that program. And I had a connection with a lady at the local zoo in Houston who's in the sea lion department. And so I researched about the sea turtle program and presented it to her and asked for feedback and asked for tips on where I should go from there. So that was my first sort of step in trying to design my own learning experience and really explore for myself what I was passionate in outside of the school environment. And then I think my next biggest one was obviously, oh, you're on mute, Dad.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe we can pause there, because I'm sure there are several questions that have come up to Kath and Michael's mind. You guys have any questions for her so far, or you want to continue?
Yeah, no, I want to back up a little bit. So great story, Olivia. You said that when you left school, you had known other friends who were self-directed. I was curious, had your father already been a renegade? Did you know he was a renegade? Did he play a role at all, or not at all?
He played a very big role, and I sort of follow in his footsteps. But he was not always, how he is now. He was traditional for a while, saying, like grades, like effort and grades, that's what we should aim for in school. But as he started to learn more about it, and we have a good friend who was on my swim team who dropped out of another very high performing high school in Houston to take college classes to advance her college readiness. And he talked to that mother, and he started making connections with other people and learned that, that traditional high school is not the only path, or even necessarily the best path for every person to getting towards college. And so as he began to learn more about that, he does a great job at the dinner table. He just shares everything he's learned that day. So as he began to learn more about that, he would share it with us as our family, and I began to pick up sort of as he went on. And there were just several stories of students who went after what they enjoyed, and they explored what they enjoyed, and they still found a way to college. And I was, thinking about that. I was like, if I already know that I'm really interested and passionate in marine biology and marine conservation, if I know that I'm interested in art and swimming, what if I don't have to be in a classroom to learn those things? What if I can get experience outside of the classroom, experience that will make more memories in my mind and make much more impact and much more, give me much more like skills that I can take into life. And so through some of those stories that my dad would share, that's how I sort of began to pick up on this idea that maybe I could learn outside of school. So yeah.
So one more, and then I'll let you in, Kath. I guess what I'm hearing is maybe that he radicalized you, but I guess the question I would have is, were you ever ahead of him? Did you ever kind of radicalize him?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure about that. Generally speaking, I don't think so. Just because I don't know if this is if this will make sense, but I was young whenever I started making these transitions, so I wasn't thinking for myself as much as I think for myself now. So I doubt that I radicalized him at all during that transition. But he's shrugging, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I think, what radicalizes a parent, Michael, is when you see a child do something that you didn't think they could do, right? Mm-hmm. That's actually a radicalizing activity. And then you start asking yourself the question, maybe I should stop giving them advice because they're able to do more than I think. And so yeah, I saw some of that.
So go ahead, Kath.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying the whole journey is really, really fascinating. So it sounds like you're almost like doing school at home, and now that you're gaining confidence to be able to actually create your education, which is just so exciting to me. And I think you really nailed it when you said, I just really realized how much discipline I needed if I was going to really self-direct myself, because, it's, we all, I guess like to do things that, if we don't have deadlines, it's easy to get a little bit more flexible with deadlines, and you have to really make these and challenge yourself to stick with these deadlines. So I want to know how it feels to you now that you're almost like emancipated from the school system, right?
I know.
Like you're already living your life, and to me it feels like when I'm thinking of all these other teenagers, is that they're waiting to be emancipated and you're already there, right? And do you feel like a different person now that you've got this freedom?
I do. I feel a lot more, sort of like what Dad was saying, a lot more confident in my ability to do things. It's just like sort of simple things like, and Dad always sort of makes fun of me for this, but I would be really nervous about talking on the phone with people, anybody, even if I knew them, if I didn't know them, getting on a conversation with someone, even face to face, it made me really nervous. But I had several experiences where I would call people, interview people, have interviews like this, where I just started developing the ability to sort of focus and streamline my thought process. My ability to communicate has improved drastically, both verbally, orally, and written. And there is a level of confidence that I have in, myself, that I think that students in the traditional system might lack, just because I know that, I know I'm different. I know I'm not doing, algebra 2, geometry, or whatever, those classes in my day-to-day life. But I still know that I am capable of doing them if I chose to do so. And I'm capable of a lot more than sitting in a classroom for 8 hours. Yeah, so I think that's probably one of the biggest changes I've seen in myself, just my own self-confidence and my own self belief, I guess. Yeah.
So
And I just want to, sorry,
Go ahead.
Michael,
Go ahead. Now she froze. Are you there, Kath? Well, she's frozen. What I was going to say is, even though prior to this, I'd only known you through LinkedIn, you come across as extremely confident in your LinkedIn written voice, and you are very confident in person, so to speak, as well. So I think you're absolutely right.
Thanks.
Poor
Yeah.
Kath,
I'm
I
sorry.
feel as if,
no, I'm back. I'm so sorry.
go ahead.
I'm
It's
so
just
sorry.
telling her how confident she was, but go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I'm wondering if her relationship with her father has changed through this process, like over the last 3 years.
It has. I think, honestly, we have started butting heads more, because as I've grown more confident in my ability to think for myself and my ability to talk, I've become challenged. I've started challenging him a lot more. So I think that is, I think that is something that he might be proud of, that I am thinking for myself, but I know that it gets challenging whenever he sets rules and I ask, okay, well, why? But yeah, that's, but I also, our relationship has gone through a little bit of challenges just because of how I've grown, both maturity wise in my age, but also in my confidence. But I think there's also an element of trust that has also grown, because I know that he trusts me to handle myself a lot more. And because he trusts me to do that, I am really grateful for that, because I know that, not every parent maybe trusts their kid with as much responsibility as I have at 17 years of age. So, yeah.
Very cool. So I want to go backwards again.
Yeah.
And, it's almost too easy for all of us to become, a rah, this is the best thing on earth, because we all believe it. To kind of remember the other side, I'd love to hear about any negative, critical, or skeptical voices. Were there any family or friends or advisors, or I assume that it wasn't just all cheerleading all the way. Go Olivia, leave the system. So can you talk a little bit about the skeptical voices?
Yeah. So actually, most of my friends thought that it was really amazing. They're like, that sounds really cool. Obviously, they were a little bit nervous about the idea of college and how my very untraditional learning path would translate into college. But for the most part, they were very open to it. It was my grandparents who grew up in a very, very traditional learning environment. My grandmother was a teacher, and so, she taught in a very, very traditional learning environment that they, I think in their eyes, I'm a high school dropout and I'm not going to get to college. I'm not going to be employed. So I think that, yeah, there was an element of whenever we're talking about school with them, I get a little bit on guard because I know that they aren't confident that the path that I'm on right now will lead to anything but me being unemployed with no diploma or no degree or anything like that. Which, it's a real fear, they came from a place where people who dropped out of high school didn't end up anywhere, they ended up on the streets. But because the world has changed, I feel confident in myself, but obviously they grew up in a place where the world that is today was not. So.
Did you ever experience any doubt along the path? Maybe your father was taking you in the wrong direction?
I never thought that Dad was taking me in the wrong direction, but I did have a lot of doubt of whether, especially in my self-directed learning experience, if what I had taught myself or what I had decided to learn would be enough to convince colleges that I was ready to learn, eager to learn, capable, mature, a leader, things like that. Because, I don't have a GPA or a transcript or class rank that I can submit to colleges. You know, I haven't even taken the SAT that I can submit to college and say, okay, well, maybe I haven't done the traditional coursework, but I've taken an SAT. So that is definitely, it's nervous. And, you know, right now technically I would be a senior in high school. And so I've started applying to colleges, and there's a lot of applications where there is no self-directed part. You know, you have to put in the school, like what school did you go to, like what's the grading system like, what's your GPA, things like that. And it is nerve-wracking, because I know that a lot of my friends who follow the very traditional route, they have it easy, you know, in that sense. They have it, you know, that you submit the transcript, you follow the steps, and you press apply. For me, it's not that simple, which is, you know, it's a little nerve-wracking, but it's a risk I'm willing to take because I've learned so much more, that yeah.
So I have a lot to say on the college admissions piece, but before doing so, I want to go from sea turtles to you writing a book. Somehow
Yes.
I missed, you know, a big jump there, or maybe not a big jump.
Yeah, so it was a pretty big chunk. So starting middle of the second semester of my quote unquote junior year, my dad connected with a lady who was also in the field of education, who was writing a book with this program. And she was like, you really need to look at this. This is gonna be amazing. So Dad talked to my sister and I and was like, guys, you really need to look at this. This would be amazing. So I checked it out. And it was amazing. It was a program that helped people write books. But the thing was, I didn't know what I was going to write a book about, right? So one of the questions that they would ask is, what are 3 topics that you think would have an interesting intersection? And so for me, the topics that I chose for my book were mental health, sports, and nature. So the sports came from the fact that I'm a highly competitive athlete. The mental health came from, personal experiences and just sort of the intersection I could find between sports and nature. And then nature came from my longstanding love of the ocean, of the natural world. And so I decided to start researching and start finding the intersection between these topics. And oh my gosh, I fell in love with it. You know, I always thought that I was going to spend my self-directed learning studying marine conservation, marine biology. But this book and this process has been so amazing. So the thesis, I guess, for my book is exploring how nature can play a role in strengthening, supporting, and reinforcing the mental health of elite athletes. So it's a very interesting and weird intersection, but it is fascinating to research, to interview people about, to write about. And I've also been fascinated by how supportive people have been when I tell them, you know, I'm a teen author trying to publish a book, December of this year. So, yeah.
So cool.
Let me just insert something there, Michael and Kath. I mean, writing a book, it touches on so many areas of learning. And so it's the research, it's the interviewing skills, because she's interviewed 2 Olympic athletes for this book. She had to raise money to pay for it. So she had to get on the phone, talk to people, send out notes, et cetera. She had to market herself. There's a lot of skills that are entirely transferable. I don't know if she fully appreciates it, but certainly universities don't typically. Many don't, but most businesses would, right? And so there's this challenge of a university asking kids to do something that really is not valued after university. But those are some skills that, again, documentable skills. Obviously, she learned them. Obviously, she's 10 years ahead of what a typical learner would be, because she followed this different pathway.
So Matt, you and I need to have a long conversation about college admissions. I would say actually most admissions committees absolutely would be impressed by this.
Fair enough.
Scores. Yeah.
Fair enough.
So literally, and Olivia, just to give you a little bit of confidence, you know, I've known a lot of people. I've known somebody who was on the Harvard Alumni Admissions Committee, somebody who headed the Yale Admissions Committee, somebody who's son of a famous Stanford Admissions Committee person, and especially at the top, they really care about achievements like this. And one way to think about it is most kids are boring. All those kids you left behind who are getting grades, no, I don't mean to be personal insults or anything, but they all sound the same. And so you get to, 4.0 GPA, 1550 SAT, blah, 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 student council, varsity sports, and you get, oh, Olivia Barnes wrote a book. Whoa, and the book, and it's an original book. That's the other thing, is you say it's sort of, I forget the adjective you used, but it is an interesting juxtaposition. And so it does sound like an interesting, cool book. And so I think, would they rather have, student number 555,000 who got grades, or somebody who wrote a cool book? Pretty easy. And yeah, if you want help, I always think of selling students. So how do I sell Olivia Barnes to an admissions committee? It's totally a sales process. So, we can sell you to admissions committees. Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
Welcome. And I want to know, so first of all, on the athleticism, first, you say competitive athlete. I want you to, sounds like you're pretty serious. I want to hear more. And swimming in nature, I think of swimmers as people with green skin who are underwater all the time. So talk a little bit about your swimming and going out in nature, and give us some details on all of this.
Yeah, so just to give you a background on my swimming experience, I've been swimming competitively since I was 6 or 7. Love the sport. And part of the reason why I love it so much is because I love being in the water. And so my love for the ocean, which is sort of my biggest calling in life, which is marine conservation, very easily translates into my love for competitive swimming because of that tie of just being in the water and that feel of being in the water. And for me, I love competition. So finding the ways to feel the water and to move across the pool faster than everyone else is super exciting. It gives me this rush that's incredible. And I'm pretty successful in the sport. But it's really interesting. We usually train at the University of Houston Natatorium. And whenever COVID first hit, they kicked us out. So they shut everything down. We didn't have a place to swim. One of my teammates has a lake in his backyard. He does not live like in the city of Houston. He lives probably 30 minutes south. And so our team went to his lake, and that was probably the most amazing and most enjoyable experience of my swimming career. Swimming in the lake, it was green, you couldn't see right in front of your face. There were no lane ropes, so we were all sort of like zigzagging across the lake. It got really hot in the summer, but just being outside, doing something that I loved in something that I loved was, I think, part of what made that experience so memorable and so enjoyable. I remember there's one time we were caught in the middle of a rainstorm, and so it was raining on the lake, and I remember swimming butterfly, and whenever I breathed, I could see the wind and the waves like coming towards my face, and it's not something that you can get in a competition pool. So that was that was a really enjoyable memory. But yeah.
Very cool. I grew up swimming in lakes, and I absolutely love it. Not at your level. So I do want to. You say you've done pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and say what's the highest competition you've won or placed in, or I want to hear numbers.
Yeah. So Texas is a very competitive state. I will say that. So each year I've made it to. So we have a statewide meet in both the summer and in the winter. So I've made it to those meets. I've yet to final at one of those meets, but I have made it consistently in the past, and I've been getting closer and closer to finaling. And then this past winter, I actually made it to Junior Nationals, which was a national meet, and finaled in that meet and got 23rd, which was very exciting because that was my first Junior Nationals. And we're going to see about this season. I'm going to hope to make it to Junior Nationals again. But, you never know. But, yeah. Those are some
23rd Junior
numbers.
Nationals is worth bragging about.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are swim teams, collegiate swim teams recruiting you?
They are. Yeah, and it is difficult because this is one thing that I have been struggling with. Finding out whether I want to swim on D1, D2, or D3. D1 is the most competitive by a large margin. D2 is pretty competitive. And then D3 is competitive in some schools, but then they don't offer scholarships. And so, you know, going to a D3 school, I'd get the swimming experience. I'd also get the learning experience. Going to the D1 school, I'd get the competitive swimming, maybe not so much learning. But that is something that's it's challenging for me because there are some athletes on my team who it's like swimming is their life. So they're going to a D1 school, regardless of what the academics are like. And then there's the flip side, you know, they're just swimming for the fun of it. So yeah, it's been a little bit challenging trying to figure out where that balance lies, because I am competitive academically and I am competitive athletically. So how do I find the balance between both of those worlds?
What are your dreams? And then I'm so many things I want to know, but I'll let you guys in a minute. What are your top 5 colleges? Do you mind letting us know what are your 5?
Yeah.
Preferred, all things considered?
Yeah. So number 1 is probably University of Tampa. They have a D2 swim team. I am pretty competitive on that swim team. They also are right near the coast, and they have marine biology internships and majors that I would love to be a part of. And then 2 and 3, I don't know which order, are UT and Rice. They both have, well, UT has an amazing swim team, so that would be extremely hard to get into. But they both are in Texas and have great swim teams. And then probably University of California, San Diego. Obviously be an amazing location. They also have an amazing swim team. And then my dream school is University of California, Berkeley. But I have to put in, I have to let myself know that I can make any school enjoyable. You know, it's my dream school because a ton of my athletic idols swam for that school. My coach is really fond of the coaches there. They have an amazing academic reputation. I love where they're located. But you know, at the end of the day, they're super expensive and super competitive. So I have to wear that in as well. But yeah, those are probably my top 5.
Well, very cool. And yeah, if I can't promise it, but if you want some strategies on getting into them, we should talk. So
yeah, I love that.
Very cool. Go ahead, Kath. I've been monopolizing it for a long time.
Oh, I'm enjoying everything that you're talking about. All right. So, okay, apart from the book, apart from, you know, your study on the turtles, what else are you doing in your self-directed learning?
I have been trying to, and I've sort of been experimenting with this, trying to incorporate art into marine conservation. So one of the ways in which I did that was just painting. I love to paint. And so I've started trying to paint images that capture ocean and sort of add that element of conservation with that. And then towards the end of junior year, I started exploring wildlife photography, trying to expand my skills in photography and see if that was also an area where I might be interested in. And as I learn more, I research more, I think that would be something I could really get behind, not just being outside in the natural habitat, but being able to document the animals and the wildlife in their natural habitat and share a message with the world of why, you know, we need to conserve the oceans and we need to save them and protect them. So yeah, those are some things that I've been doing along. And my book has taken up a ton of time. So after I sort of started that, a lot of other things fell behind. So the 3 things I'm really focusing on right now are swimming, my book, and wildlife photography. I also have a job, so that also takes up some of my time. But
What's your job?
I'm a lifeguard at one of the YMCA's downtown.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. And so what's your dream 5 to 10 years from now? What would you like to be doing 5 to 10 years from now?
That is a great question. And it sort of varies from day to day. So I'll give you some of the 3 that I think would be really interesting. I'd really love to do. One of them is what I had talked about. I don't know the specifics behind it, but wildlife photography. There are several people that I've been following who that's what they do for a living. You know, they go out and they photograph, animals in the wild and capture these amazing moments, and then share them with the world and say, this is why we need to protect them. They are keeping our world, they're helping our world spin, they're helping it go round. And then another one is working with conservation programs to save the, I don't know if you've heard of them, they're porpoises in the Sea of Cortez vaquitas. They're around 20 or so left in the wild, maybe less than that by now. I'm not sure. But they're seriously endangered, have no sort of relocation has worked, and their numbers are dropping so fast. That would be something that, I feel like if I lived and was conscious of a species going extinct, that would weigh on me for the rest of my life. And so definitely trying to do something there, trying to make change there. And then the third one was actually, I sort of began thinking about this more recently, creating almost we listened to a podcast by Sal Khan and how he sort of built Khan Academy. And so creating my equivalent of Khan Academy, which would be sort of an ocean academy. I would interview people on every sort of relationship with the ocean to learn more about how the ocean sort of affects us as people, and share that with people so we have a more knowledgeable and diverse and whole sort of understanding of what goes into preserving the ocean, destroying the ocean, just everything that goes into that, fishermen, politicians, surfers, photographers, divers, everything. I just find that very interesting. And so I think that would be, those are some of the 3 things that if I was doing those in 5 to 10 years, that would be amazing.
So very, very clear ocean focus, nature focus. Very cool.
Yes.
Yeah, well, please do that, because I'd just love to subscribe to your YouTube channel and see that too. What a great way of helping people gain empathy to all the matters concerning the ocean.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to go back to the being, as it were, an outsider to the system. Is there any part of you, even a trace part of you, that kind of wishes you were, I don't know, about things like prom and football games? And are you part of that, or do you wish you were part of that, or what's your relationship to that whole thing?
I'm not part of that, and I wish I was. I tell my mom all the time about how I wish I had a prom, which is, I know it's silly because I could just invite girlfriends over and we could do it in the backyard or something, but there is the social aspect of school that I do miss. Not even miss, because I didn't have, the school I went to was a performing arts and visual arts school. We didn't have a football team or a basketball team, and there weren't a whole lot of social events. But it's the idea that, what I'm doing, I might miss out on, the typical high school experience, going to homecoming or prom, or I don't know, Friday night lights or stuff like that. That I do, I wish I could experience it just like a little bit. But I also know that my life is not going to be heavily impacted if I don't. So.
Have you maintained friendships with your peers at the school you used to attend?
Yeah, some better than others. But yeah, sort of through all the schools that I went to, I sort of maintained some friendships. The unfortunate thing is that even though I live in Houston, most of my friends don't live near the city. They live in suburbs like 40 an hour away, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it is it's unfortunate that I don't have that sort of social structure that you get in schools. Because, you know, if you're in school with someone 5 days a week, you're going to have classes with them, you're going to hang out with them, you're going to go to lunch with them. Even if you don't go and hang out outside of school, you're still going to see them and you get that social experience, which I haven't had as much of. I found that on my swim team. But yeah, it is nice to stay in touch with the friends that I have maintained, but that is something that I wish I did a better job of, because that is something that I have seriously lacked in my self-directed learning, is a social life, I guess.
Is there any kind of community of homeschoolers or alt schoolers or anything like that in Houston where those of you who are outside the system can build community?
There is, but I have not done a good job of trying to find people like that. Yeah. And that's on me. Yeah, that's not like the self-directed learning's fault. That's just on me.
Well, again, I think you're overly honorable. One way, I'll flip it around and say, I think one of the challenges of going in this direction, and it's actually helpful you're so direct about this, is I feel as if the establishment, have kind of gathered all the peer relationships in these big, huge buildings at immense cost. And yes, it's like prison, and it, you know, destroys initiative and creativity and yada, yada, yada. I can go on and on and on, but that's where all the social stuff is. And so it feels like for people who are pioneers such as yourself, it feels very cruel to me that the system has, you know, not through anyone's intention. They didn't say, we're going to make Olivia's life difficult. You know, nobody said that, but it's just a fact of life. And we've talked about that kind of thing around here.
Yeah, but they should be included. I think that all people in a town, I mean, we're paying taxes, that, you know, everybody should be entitled to go to all these sort of extracurricular activities, you know, whether you're homeschooled or whether no matter where you're getting your academics. That you shouldn't be excluded for that. And there are a lot of examples of towns now, including, you know, homeschooled students in different areas of the school life, but not enough. And I'm sorry you didn't get that. And I'm just thinking, you know, my daughter was thinking the same thing because she was homeschooled all the way through.
Yeah.
And she was a passionate writer, and she just had all these different passions. And when she got to college, all of a sudden she wasn't homeschooled anymore. She was like one of the many going through college,
Right.
And you know, she didn't feel like she'd missed out on anything after, you know, just getting over that, like wanting to be like everyone else. And it didn't take very long before she was like, oh well, actually I really want to be unique, I don't want to be like everybody else.
Right.
But there is that feeling, I know that maybe you're missing out on something, but I'm sure that if you want to go to a prom, that, you know, we could probably locate one for you.
Yeah, personally, I found high school social life mostly appalling. So I didn't find my people till I went to college. And so it could be that you would have had an incredible social time, and it could be that some part of you would be looking like, how immature are they? You're so very mature now that that's a different kind of scene over there on the other side. But Matt, we haven't let you in at all. Do you have any questions for our guests tonight?
You know, it's interesting because I'm learning a lot about Olivia in this conversation. We need to have more interviews so I can sit in and listen and kind of get caught up on what's going on in her life. I will say one thing about the social piece is that when you're in the urban core, which we are in Houston, we're real close to downtown, the opportunities for social homeschoolers, usually they're more in the suburbs. Not always, but usually in the suburbs, there's a more concentration of that population and a much more developed social environment. And so that is one thing that is kind of interesting, although I'm seeing that starting to change. But, you know, Olivia is maybe in the earlier phase of that. But that's one kind of challenge that comes from just being in an urban context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we found a lot of our social activities through things like you're saying, you're swimming or theater, or, where there are little communities of practice where you can go and find other people doing the thing that really excites you. And it doesn't matter if your friends have become, are a little older or a little younger. Gives you a lot more variety in who you're associating with, and those friendships can last a long time, if they're in your passions. And often, friendships, you meet someone in one class and then the next time they're not in the same class and you lose touch with them.
Right.
So, and I really feel like you can only have a few really good friends. So you need to find your people. And I think that most teens that I've come across in the homeschooling journey, have a small group of more tight friendships, I would say, than a lot of acquaintances.
No, and I would say that I think when first year of college, a lot of kids, because they've never been independent and are way less mature than you, their first year of college is a mess. And so I actually think you will get a lot more out of your first year of college because you're a grown-up already. Let's not have that stupid freshman year thing going on.
God, no.
Exactly.
No, and it will be so much easier for you. You'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier. It's like they're handing me all these classes. It's so easy. You're going to make the most of every single opportunity that you have in that place. And you're going there for the right reasons. You're really passionate. You're really going to, push your skills up to the next level. And it's just really exciting thinking about the future that you're going to have, because you know so much about yourself. And you're doing that action to move yourself forward. It's just beautiful to watch.
Thank you.
And I want to know more about the publication, distribution, marketing of your book. So tell us how this is going to happen.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, okay, the way that the sort of publishing and whole writing phase goes is that I spent from March to June writing the manuscript, and then I went into the marketing phase. So for my publisher, it's a hybrid publishing company, so I get all rights on the book, but they're the ones who, find the editors and stuff like that, and they are the ones who publish it. So I had to raise money to cover the publishing costs, unless I wanted to pay it out of pocket, which I could not because I don't have that kind of money. And so that was a month long of a lot of stress and a lot of phone calls, like what my dad was talking about, reaching out to people and asking them for money, telling them about the book and about my message and what I wanted to share. And then I went into the revisions and editing phase, which I'm in right now. And then it will go on to the actual publishing of the book and the distribution, like you were talking about. But yeah, I still have a ways to go because I have not sort of started the sort of second round of marketing of that in that sense. Whenever the book gets published, I'm sort of still in the middle of the revisions part, but yeah.
Which hybrid publisher, by the way?
New Degree Press.
Okay, don't know that one, but my wife is in the process of publishing a book and we're looking at hybrid as a possibility. So who's going to buy your book? What's the demographic profile look like?
So my target audience is athletes. I think ages 18 to 35. Athletes who are sort of getting to that point where they're being extremely competitive, or even athletes who are getting to the point where they might retire from the sport. And what I find is really interesting is that depression hits around that time. And it hits really, really, really hard for athletes. And so that is part of the reason why I'm writing this book. It was an intersection that I found fascinating, but it was also a place that I was like, that there needs to be someone talking about the fact that athletes are going through all these mental illnesses and they're not getting support because mental illness is stigmatized in the athletic community. And so for me, nature has been a huge help just because nature doesn't judge. And it's accessible to everyone, and it's free, and it's easy, and it calms you, it lowers your stress, it brings you peace. And so that's the target audience I'm trying to target, and the message I'm trying to convey to them.
Very cool. And do you have amazing blurbs by any high-profile athletes?
I do, not off the top of my head.
No, I mean, just thinking out loud about marketing, when I hear you, first of all, I have known a number of former professional athletes who became depressed, and sometimes it's really horrible, sometimes seriously depressed, substance abuse, suicide, and it's a really serious problem. You know, and that transition is just so hard to manage. And, you know, in terms of making Olivia Barnes and her book famous, I'm thinking, what if you had like 3 or 4 or 5, 10, 12, either recently retired athletes or about to retire athletes who read your book, were transformed, went out and got their nature experience. Maybe you went to a weekend retreat held by Olivia Barnes. You know, I'm kind of, hey, you know, dream big. And, you know, imagine if you could get those sorts of, and live interviews. So suppose you interviewed these, did video interviews to promote your book with a bunch of, you know, retired or recently, you know, that kind of person. Is there any reason you couldn't or shouldn't do that?
No, that's an excellent idea. And I was sort of thinking about that. And, you know, part of me is like, nah, you can't do that. Come on, what are you talking about? But, you know, I also realized that 3 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that I could write a book at 17. So,
you know, this is UC Berkeley. So it'd be good to have great SAT scores, and maybe you'll have great SAT scores. And if you are getting national media for your book in December, January, universities, you know, that's an admissions ticket. So I think you should dream big.
Yeah.
Cool. So you've got some more work to do when you're not swimming in lakes, whatnot.
You know, this is actually part of her learning too, Michael. You know, we've talked about this, Olivia. I think you don't mind me disclosing that, you know, the dinner party conversations are always the hardest. When an adult looks at Olivia and says, well, you know, what grade are you in? And she doesn't really have a real, you know, set answer. Like, well, where are you looking at college? Right. I mean, and there are all these assumptions around what she should be doing as a 17-year-old. And, you know, Olivia struggled a little bit with how much does she just blow them up by just describing the details of her experience, and how much does she just kind of, you know, let it slide by. But I mean, I would want her to really lean into it, because part of what I'm realizing is happening with me and with my family is that we're trying to signal to everybody else that there is a way that is beautiful, and it's sometimes hard, but it creates Olivias and Bens and Elizabeths. It creates kids that are just literally 10 years ahead in terms of their maturity, in terms of the parents not having to worry about where they're going to be, what choices they're going to make. I have zero concerns about my daughter. If she were to, you know, go, you know, travel someplace, she can handle herself. She's made these decisions. I'm not worried about her getting off track. And that is such a freeing place. And so I want her, and stories like, you know, the people we've had on this show, to just kind of tell the world, no, we don't have to follow the pathway that has been set up for us. And in fact, by not doing it, you create so many more options and so much more experiences that are lifelong for your kids. That's the message that I'm hopeful that conversations like this can deliver, and Olivia can lean into it more when she's asked those awkward questions at dinner parties.
Big time. Well, in my view of schooling is mostly schooling is a place that teaches people, you know, we talk a lot about self-limiting beliefs. I think most of what school does is imposes self-limiting beliefs. And
I agree.
You know, you can't believe that you're going to win a swim competition if you don't have a chance, but you also do want to believe that you can do your best shot, and your best shot could be better than it's ever been before. And, you know, in terms of reaching out to people, you know, I always say that learning to cold call email has been more valuable in any degrees I've ever had. And so, you know, if you can absolutely unapologetically reach out to all these people and be a machine at it too, you know, can you get 15 famous athletes to endorse your book? Well, email 1,000 of them. Maybe not. Maybe you want to be more custom than that. But again, part of this is shameless self-promotion, shameless confidence, and we can make it so it's not about you, it's about the cause. And so the cause is the ocean, the cause is athletes' mental wellness, the cause is alternative education. So on behalf of all these higher purposes, absolutely, full out, no self-limiting beliefs allowed.
Yeah, and such an important book. Like, it's so, to me, it's just so impressive that you've had this experience and that you're sharing with the world, and you're sharing it in an area that you just love, and your passion just like oozes out of what you're doing. And I can just see so much joy. And I just wish, every other teen could experience the joy of learning, the joy in self-discovering of who they really, really are, and being able to authentically express themselves just like you're doing, and going out into the world confidently, choosing your colleges, knowing that you're just going to be able to, make the most of every second that you're there. And I, just like your father, think that you're just going to have the best life ever. So I'm so happy that I've been a part of this conversation today.
Thank you.
Well, let's do the closing ritual, which is the Kath question and the Matt question. So Kath, you want to do the Kath question?
Yes, I think she answered it earlier though. I always ask Olivia, what would you have liked to have seen, in your, once you're outside the school system, in your town or community, that would have supported you more as a person who'd chosen this pathway?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know if this is too much to ask, but just people accepting differences. That's something that is a little, sometimes people get a little bit hesitant, especially my hair's growing back now, but I've been bald for the past several months. And that is a pretty big difference as well. So just accepting that not everyone is the same, like that people can be different and they can still be amazing.
And it's not too much to ask.
Thank you.
No self-limiting, no apologies. But go ahead, Matt. Give her the Matt question.
Yeah. So Olivia, one of the questions we always ask is, if you could wave your magic wand and change one aspect of traditional school, what would you change, and what would that be?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I've been asked this in an education interview before. So I will use the same answer. Freedom to be bored. That was something that I did not have when I was at the public school I went to. I think part of the reason, even at my self-directed school, social media and YouTube creeps in there really fast. You don't have it for the freedom to be bored. But in the traditional environment, because it's so rigid, if they say, no phones, no computers, grab a book or think, I think that could be really helpful for people to find out more about themselves, to learn more about the world and about what impact they want to make in the world. Because I think what's the biggest thing that I've learned from my self-directed learning experience is that, I've discovered so much more about myself and about what I want to do in the world than I did before. Yeah, so the freedom to be bored, definitely.
Nice.
So fabulous. That was beautiful and original, Olivia. And with that, this is the last episode of When School's Not Working. If anybody out there wants to subsidize or volunteer to keep this going, we are super passionate about that. There are hundreds, thousands of amazing human beings outside the system. And so we want to completely normalize living a glorious, purpose-driven life the way Olivia Barnes is doing. So in order to help us help other young people have great lives like Olivia, let's keep this going. So thanks to my co-hosts, Kath Fraze and Matt Barnes. It's been an absolute joy. I will miss you. And yeah, maybe we can have an annual When School's Not Working reunion or something.
At Kath's place in Montana. How's that?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have our yearly retreat and bring Olivia.
Absolutely.
Right, we'll have the.
We have a lake
Olivia-
to swim in.
Well, I was going to say we'll have the swimming in the green mossy lake Olivia Barnes Memorial. Swim.
Yeah. Mhm.
Nice, nice.
I love it. Love it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have
Okay.
a wonderful
Okay.
time. Bye bye.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you guys.